Welcome to the 3P's podcast, where we explore how people, property, and profits come together to shape the future of fire and security. I'm Scott Elkins, CEO of Zeus Fire and Security, and your host for today. On this show, we're going to dive into the real-world challenges and opportunities facing our industry as we talk with the people who are out there making a difference. Today kicks off a special three-part series with someone who's made a significant impact here at Zeus and across the fire and life safety space, Greg Breyer. Greg is our VP of Design and Compliance and one of the most respected voices in the industry. He brings a rare combination of boots on the ground experience, technical expertise, and strategic insight from decades as a first responder, educator, and corporate leader. Throughout this series, we'll explore new fire system installations, monitoring takeovers, and test and inspection programs, breaking down what commercial property leaders really need to know. If you care about protecting people, safeguarding property, and driving smart, sustainable profits, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it. Greg, welcome back to the 3P's podcast, our third of three in a series of fire alarm system podcasts. Thrilled to have you back on set.
Great to be here. Thanks for the time, Scott.
Of course, today, the topic of our podcast is inspect and test. And we're going to be talking about how inspect and test helps us accomplish three things. We want to protect the customer's property, we want to ensure code compliance, and we want to make sure that we help to reduce liability to the extent possible.
Absolutely.
So Greg, inspect and test feels like a very big subject narrowed down to two words. What is inspect and test?
It is. I love it too, right? Inspect and test. When we inspect, it's performing the visual observations of a system. We're looking at it. We're evaluating are the items in the condition that they need to be. And testing is when we mechanically operate or activate the system and the equipment itself to ensure that it operates the way that it was designed and installed to.
So you have to do both together? I mean, I imagine that we can't look at a smoke detector and know that it's working, right, without actually testing it, right?
It's a great point. So there's actually, the code has different cadences for inspecting as well as testing. Typically, inspecting is more frequent than testing. When our team performs an inspect and test, they often and usually do both concurrently, meaning at the same time. Mm-hmm. However, there are often requirements within the code that there's additional cadences where the inspection is required.
So in that case, an inspection would literally be, and stop me if I'm oversimplifying, be visually inspecting to see if a device looks like it would be functioning properly, like a smoke detector's not hanging off the wall or missing?
We see this in our homes also. When we have a smoke alarm that's installed in our home, every month we're supposed to take a look, make sure it's there. We don't have cobwebs that are growing over it or things that are obviously wrong with it. And then in addition, we have to mechanically operate it to ensure that there's a proper power supply and the device goes off the way that it needs to. Very similar in a commercial space with a smoke detector.
So now I understand the difference between inspect and test, both important, but in order to finish the job, so to speak, you really want to do both. Absolutely. When it's required by code.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Greg, if I'm an end user, if I'm an EC, what should I be aware of, or what should I be thinking about or asking my vendor regarding code compliance? And then what should I be concerned about?
So if I'm an end user, right, I'd like to pause on that for a second. We've invested a lot of money to ensure that we have this code compliance system installed. Now let's make sure that it's working the way that it's supposed to, right? So a lot of times we install it and then we almost forget about it, right? But this is a reminder for us that we can't just forget about it. We need to ensure that it's working the way that it was intended to. And what I always recommend and advise our clients to do is partner up with the individual that's coming and performing the inspect and test. listen to them, learn from them, ask questions. It's a great opportunity for us to help educate your team on the system that you have in your building, how it works and different things that it means. And then it also allows us to help you understand your requirements outside of our, we'll call it an annual inspect and test that we perform. If there's things that your team, whether it be a maintenance crew or others, that they're required to do on a more frequent cadence. And then of course, if you find that you would like to have additional services rendered by our team, we can have those conversations then also.
So if I have a facility and I've got a maintenance crew coming through, cleaning at night, or I've got the bug spray guy coming through, or window washers coming through, it sounds like there's a chance for devices to be compromised. Should I be thinking about having my system inspected or tested more frequently? Is it one or the other, or is it both, or is that just a crazy idea?
Yeah, no, it's a great point, right? So when we have different activities or operations that go on inside our building, those often present complications or opportunities where we could have an issue with this system. So it's important to ensure that our teams know what they can do. It's important for them to know how to protect the system. So in certain applications, there's a way that we may want to cover a device. Obviously, we need to ensure that we're doing it correctly, we're doing it safely. We have things like a fire watch going on. There's a lot of steps that we can take to ensure that we protect the investment of the system itself and that we don't cause any harm by some other operations. And as always, when in doubt, that's why you partner with someone that you trust. Give us a call. We'll help you through it and understand what the code allows you to do and what you should really be doing to protect your people, your property, and the profits associated with the continuity of business operations.
Yeah, so it really does sound like there's a pretty strong partnership, or at least there should be, between end user and vendor.
And that's what distinguishes us from others, Scott, right? If you're just looking for someone to come out and check a box, there is some value, I presume, in that if they're doing what they're supposed to do. But what we provide is that value-added service. We have that partnership. We're invested for the long term.
So inspect and test. We're going to be out there. We're going to be inspecting sometimes. We're going to be testing sometimes. We're going to be inspecting and testing sometimes. In your long career of having done this many, many, many times on both sides of the business, what's a typical problem, maybe the most typical problem or complication that an end user will run into during an inspect and test process?
I'll give you two different examples. One, unfortunately, what I often find is that the previous inspect and test was not completed. So what I mean by that, there was a gap for some reason or another, and the inspection hasn't been done. Required at minimum to be every year or annually based. What we often find with new clients is that for some reason or another, they did not have their system inspected and tested on the annual cadence that's required. So we see that as a gap. It gives us an opportunity, though, to ensure that it's operating up to code.
Okay, so we see that systems weren't tested and inspected the way they should have been.
Correct.
What's a typical job look like?
So when we perform the inspect and test, there often are issues or deficiencies that are identified, and the team needs approval in order to fix it, right? Because there's a cost to it. It needs to go through the approval level. And what we've seen, similar to the circumstances where there may not have been an inspect and test performed, what we also see fairly frequently when we take over a new client relationship is that there were items that needed to be fixed that for some reason or another it wasn't communicated, and people often don't know, and they didn't have the approval or for whatever reason did not fix. And so we can find issues with smoke detectors that are dirty and need to be replaced or cleaned. We have issues with duct detectors, other devices that over a period of time end up needing regular maintenance or replacement. It's just part of the system itself that were missed.
So it's not uncommon in your experience to go to a new customer's location where they've already been under contract and find that last inspection wasn't done, or that deficiency that was identified by a previous provider was never rectified.
Unfortunately, that's common. That's one of the reasons that at Zeus, we use a platform where we can capture all of that relevant information. We can ensure that it's available to the client, as well as we can maintain a record of it to ensure that we're doing our job by protecting their interest, and they have the records that they need to ensure that the system is operating the way that it needs to.
Yeah, so let's go off script for a moment.
Sure.
So a Zeus company comes in, inspects and tests, identifies a deficiency, notifies the customer. The customer may need a day or two to get approval, and then Nothing. We don't hear from them. Now, you just talked about the fact that we've got systems and technology that will remind us to remind the customer, but a day goes by, a week goes by, a month goes by, 2 months go by. At what point do we have to wave the flag and say something needs to happen here? And what is that something that has to happen?
It's a great point. And so we certainly wouldn't want to wait long, right? So it's important for us to communication, like with most things we find, that's an opportunity for us to exceed or succeed, I should say. So as soon as we find that there's a deficiency, it's noted on site, it's provided to the site representative, and then there's immediately a process where we connect with the building owner representative. We don't wait weeks, we don't wait months, because these are life safety systems. The code requires, if there's an impairment to a fire alarm system, that the AHJ be notified within 8 hours. So that we partner with our clients so that way we ensure that they know really what's happening, what the exposure is, and we can find the best way to approach it for them, for the AHJ, and for us to ensure that we're all operating compliantly and safely.
So 2 days later, we haven't gotten the go-ahead from the customer. We've called, we've emailed, we've done everything that we could possibly do. What's the next step?
We send notification, right? We have a process in place. Unfortunately, there are times where for one reason or another, someone may not want to resolve an issue that needs to be done. We have to put them on notice then. There is a requirement and responsibility of the owner, and there are some requirements and responsibilities by the vendor to provide notification to the AHJ when items are not addressed or rectified.
What is the AHJ, the authority having jurisdiction, what's the AHJ likely to do in that case, or require of the end user? Or maybe require of us?
Yeah, listen, so they're all different, right? But when I was in AHJ, what I would do is when I heard that there was an issue, I would go out. I would immediately go out to the site, or one of the team would go out to the site, figure out what's going on, because it may be a circumstance where the message didn't get to the right person, or it may be a circumstance where they don't want to maintain the system for another reason. And then that becomes, right, the partnership isn't just between the client and the vendor. The partnership, or the fire triangle, includes the AHJ, right? We're all working on this together. Mm-hmm. So what I found and what I've done in the past is go out and figure out what the problem is, why it's not being addressed, and then have the enforcement measures in place to ensure that the building is being properly protected for the safety of others.
Got it. What would one enforcement method be?
Business may have to close. There may be a revocation of their certificate of occupancy, right? These are doomsday type of scenarios, but the reality, and I don't like to necessarily approach it from that perspective, but the reality of it is the code requires a system to be installed, and it requires it to be in proper working order, and someone's not maintaining it. That creates a life safety issue, not only for the occupants of that building, but for first responders that may go out when there is an issue. So in my experience in AHJ, will hold the line. If someone's not going to fix it, they will make them fix it. And the way that they do that is by revoking the certificate of occupancy, and then you have that impact in business continuity that we typically pride ourselves in protecting for the customer.
We live in a world with a lot of regulation, and I think most people would argue that maybe not all of it is in the best interest of any particular party, or maybe too much in the interest of one particular party. It sounds to me like these regulations are only in the interest of protecting assets, right? Whether those are people, we talk about people, property, and profits, right? It feels to me like this is the kind of regulation that saves lives.
Absolutely. It doesn't follow political lines or different boundaries. It's not in favor of the client or the vendor. It's in favor of life safety, period.
Makes sense. So in your life experience in the fire space, you'll speak to a client, an end user, and they're not really interested in having their system inspected and tested, even though it's required. What would you say to them in 15 or 30 seconds or less?
I'd start with protect your investment. You already invested the amount of money that it was required to have this system installed. Let's protect that investment, and let's ensure that it's able to operate the way that you need it to prevent or reduce disruptions to business operations, damage to property, or to others. Right? Protect your investment, your people, your assets, as you mentioned before.
Yeah. So sometimes it's just a matter of somebody maybe not really appreciating that this is a life safety matter, and it could be much, much worse by not doing it. This isn't the kind of thing you put off for This is the kind of thing you put off for 6 months. This is the kind of thing you don't put off for a day.
Sure, of course. This is something that often, when I approach it too much of an extreme, and really I don't consider it an extreme. The reality of it is, if we don't ensure that these systems operate correctly, we could have people hurt or killed. What I've found in my experience that's more relatable is if you don't ensure that the system is operating correctly, it very well may cause a disruption to your business operations. And that usually gets their attention in a different way, right? The time for us to come in and properly inspect and test is a whole lot less than the time that you'll spend if your system is out of service and you're unable to perform business operations.
Yeah, so if you've got the lesser of two evils, certainly let us come in and inspect and test, get your system up to speed, make sure it's up to code, make sure your people are going to be safe, and then go back to whatever you're doing for your day job.
Sure.
How does Zeus differentiate itself when it comes to fire?
It's earning the trust, right? And the reality of it is our customers have grown to respect and trust us, and that's because we earn it. It's important for the customers to understand there's a reason why we're saying this. It's not just to make more money. It's not to make their life difficult. There's a reason. It's protecting people, property, and profits. That's what we're looking to do, and we're here to advocate for them. And if we can earn their trust, then they'll understand that even if they don't know why we say we may need to do something or on a certain cadence or frequency, there's a reason because we're looking out for the good of them and their team.
And my guess is that looking out started, if you go all the way back to episode 1 of this podcast series, where we talked just about the fire alarm process from beginning to end. Has to be a lot of trust earned in the early stages when we're laying out the system, because now the customer is talking about, hey, what's this going to cost? And we're talking about not only what's required, but what should be done in order to maintain the safety of your employees. The trust starts there, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're looking for the long-term partnerships. Trust and partnerships are the key words.
So, Greg, I can't thank you enough for being here to wrap up our 3-part podcast series, this one on Inspect and Test. Extremely informative. I've had a great time and a great journey kind of learning about fire alarm systems all the way through the process, from the day they get designed, like the day you meet the end user, the customer, all the way through installation, all the way through monitoring takeovers, and finally to inspect and test to really keep that continuity going. This has been a great podcast series that I've really enjoyed. I've learned a lot. I hope everybody that's been listening to these podcast series has learned a lot as well. Feel free to reach out to any of us at Zeus for more information regarding fire alarms, fire alarm installation, design, test and inspect, and anything having to do with fire. We've got the experts. Greg Breyer represents fire alarms at Zeus Fire and Security. We look forward to working with you and earning your trust as well. Thanks so much for being part of our podcast series, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.